So now we want to talk about writing ratios in the form 1 to n. Here, n is just any number that's going to kind of come as a result of making that first number in our ratio 1. Okay, so it doesn't matter what the other value is. It can be a fraction, it can be a decimal. It probably will end up being something quite rather unpleasant for the most part, based on the fact that we are just dividing. Fine, we don't care. So, anyways, we mostly deal with this when we're doing map scales, conversions, bearings, because we'll find something like converting euros to pounds, dollars to yen, bearings. We can start to talk about, well, that is where we use more of our maps and scales, because we could put something in terms of one of something is related to this many lengths. So on a map, you could have 1 centimeter is 2.5 miles, and then have to do some conversions in there. So they often represent stuff as 1 to something, right? So, but it's really actually quite easy how we do this, and we divide both sides of our expression by the value on the left-hand side. So before we were dividing them by the same number, and we were picking that value. Now we're just simply dividing both sides by the left number. So what's this going to look like? Well, if we look at example 1, we are just going to divide both sides by 3, and we'll get 1, 2. Well, 15 over 3 is 5. So, like I said, they can be nice, but we are going to see where they're going to slowly become nasty. But we don't really have to do much with that. So here, what are we going to divide by? Well, the leftmost number is 2. And so we can represent this as 1, 2, and then 9 over 2. So we can write that as, well, 4.5. If you know it as a decimal, I would always write it as a decimal, just more proper. Here, stepping up the difficulty little by little, well, this is a mix between what we've just done with converting it all to the same unit, getting rid of it, and then writing it as the form 1 to n. Because notice in the form 1 to n, there are no units in there. So, first off, let's write this as 10 millimeters to 20 millimeters. Then we can drop it as 10 to 20. And now, normally we would simplify, right, left and right. Turns out that the easiest form, or the most simple form, will indeed be 1 to n, which is simply divided left and right by 10. So we get 1 to 2. Now, 3 hours, 20 to 28,800 seconds in the form 1 to n. Oh my word, that looks really nasty, right? So maybe it'll look better once we get rid of hours. So let's do 3 times by 60. And that'll give us 180 minutes. Then we have to times that by 60 to get our next. So how many seconds, right? Sorry, not times again. So times by 60. So we know we're going to get, well, what's 18 times 2, right? So if you try and break this up, I'm going to do 18 times 2, which is 36, and then 36 times by 3, right? Because I just broke it up into, I'm doing 18 times by 2 times by 3 times by 10 times by 10. Pretty much is how I'm breaking up. This is a little trick to math, but this is just kind of how you work out a problem, right? I'm getting rid of that 0 on both, and that's on both the 180 and the 60. That's where I get the 10 times 10 at the end. The 2 times 3 is that 6, and I have 18. So if I do 18 times 2, I can find that's 36 times by 3. So 3 times 3 is 9. 9 and 18 is, or 90 and 18 is going to be 108. So altogether, that's 108, and we're timesing by 100, so we get 10800. Okay. what can we do now? Well, we write this out and drop the seconds, right? Because that was the whole point, was just to get something we might be able to work a little bit more with. Well, right away I can see a way to simplify this. That just might help. Sorry, I meant to do that in red. We can cross out a 0 and a 0. 2 zeros on each side, sorry. 0 and a 0 and a 0 and a 0. Now, what are we left with? Something a lot easier. So 108 to 288. And sometimes even though I could divide both sides by 108, I kind of want to see where this is going to, what decimal it might give me. And if you get it down to a simpler form, sometimes you can see it. So I'm just going to divide by 2 and divide by 2. And we'll get 54 to 144. And just keep doing the divide by 2 process, right? Because sometimes it's kind of the most brainless. It might take more time, but you don't really have to use your brain too much doing this process. And then you might start to see, well, we can divide by 3 with 27. And 72, well, how can we divide 72 by 2? 23, 24, right? So that would be 9 to 24. And we can divide by 3. Divide by 3. Like I said, you don't actually have to do this big process for these 1 to n's. I'm doing this so I can get myself out a nice decimal answer. Just to kind of show you that if they ever asked you, say if you had a non-calculator paper and you were asked to put this in a decimal at the end, this is how you'd go about, or one approach you could go about this, where you don't actually have to do long division or short division. So here we get 3 and to 8. And at this point, all you could do now is divide by 3, because that's the simplest as we can go. And we can get 1 to 8 over 3, which is 1 to 2.6 and repeating, right? And the reason why that is because you'd get 6 or 2 and 2/3, right? And 2/3 is just 0.6 repeating. So practice. Write the following ratios in the form 1 to n. So here are 7 questions. The first 4 are kind of just numerical. Next 2, you're going to have to do some conversions in there. And then the 7th is a worded question. So try them. Once you're ready, you may press play and we'll go through the answers. Okay, all right, let's start going through. The first few I'm going to go through rather quickly. So these ones, well, you can divide by 3. So we're going to get 1 to 4. Dividing by 5, we're going to get 1 to 4. Dividing by 4, we're going to get 1 to, well, 5 over 4 is 1.25, right? Because a whole would just be 4. What are you left? You're left with a quarter. So you can always try and, you could state this as 1 to 5 over 4, which is 1 and 5/4, right, is equal to 1 and 1/4, and that can help people write out the fractions. So just little tricks. So here we want to divide by 2, so we get 1 to 12.5, right? Half of 25 is 12.5. This one, let's get it all in terms of millimeters, so that's 60 to 30. And we divide both sides by 60, so we're going to get 1 to 0.5. Here we'll have 2,000 to 1,500 when we convert, and then dividing both sides by 2,000, we will get simply a ratio of 1, divided by 2,000, 0.75 or 0.75. And lastly, question 7. A mix of teal paint requires 3 parts blue to 5 parts green. And notice, like I said, sometimes as I'm reading, I just start writing stuff that can help you out. How much blue paint is needed for every 1 part green? So if we want 1 part green, we have 5 to 3. So notice I just swapped my ratio around, and I'm just going to rewrite it that way. Because we want 1 part green at the end, right? So we want 1 green, so that means I'm going to show you a method that we're going to start using a little bit. So when you have something that's missing, so here I'm dividing by 5, here I'm dividing by 5, and this is how we'll find our missing value. So here, 3 divided by 5 is simply 0.6. Okay. 3 over 5 is the same as 6 over 10, so we can do it that way.